So OMSSA today, thank you. And how nice to actually be speaking with Alf on OMSSA, because this is my second stint at OMSSA. I joined OMSSA in 2000, and I was here for 4 years, and Alf was very active and on the ground. And I remember he actually intimidated me a little bit when I first started. I was like, this guy makes me nervous. Anyway, so it's a pleasure, Alf, to still be working with you today. It's great. So I have been with OMSSA this time for 3 years, and it has been a busy and change-filled time. And in many ways, we are in the middle of change still today, with much more to come towards us. And I'm going to go a little bit into some of the contextual stuff because it's difficult to talk about today without looking at how we actually got here and what it means for the future, which we will turn over to Kira and Chuck. The policy changes and the implementation changes that you folks are all engaged with back in your shops have been driven by successive Liberal governments, with the commitment originally through the Dalton-McGuinty government to righting public policy wrongs. And those specific public policies were driven by addressing the changes of local services realignment, which goes back to the Mike Harris government, and back in the days when I actually participated in protests at Queen's Park and those types of things, when there was a lot of churn, and very scary churn at that time. So the commitment by Dalton-McGuinty to address local service realignment challenges was not necessarily driven by the question of whether or not CMSMs or DSSABS, or more specifically when you're speaking at that level, local government should be engaged in local delivery and working with their communities, but it was driven by who's paying for what. So it was the $3 billion gap through AMO, and that being driven by the fact that funding income redistribution programs that you're engaged in from the property tax base is unsustainable. Each and every one of you know that, because you have to go to council and ask for support, and you know that you are standing behind roads and bridges and traditional municipal services, and it's a tough sell. And it's also a tough sell when there's economic downturn. So it's a right discussion to be having. Most recently, with the election of Kathleen Wynne, good public policy for our sector has meant a commitment to social justice. And I can tell you that having been in this sector in a lot of different capacities, to hear a government speak about social justice, poverty reduction, making sure everyone has housing is a great place to be. Now, discussions and getting to the ground and putting it into action is often, there's a big gap, and it takes a lot of time to get there, which you only know so well. So the stream of policy changes that we have seen specifically to OMSSA have included early years childcare modernization, long-term affordable housing strategy, also known as housing modernization, and social assistance and employment reform. I just want to say very quickly from an OMSSA perspective, from policies, that we are engaged in all of those activities very actively and daily. That includes both through our networks, through working with our members directly, but also at provincial tables with working on policy development in all of those areas, as well as through AMO. So we are very active, and I thought yesterday when Keith said, you know, that we often hear what's OMSSA doing, and right away it concerned me, and I started getting really nervous, and I thought, we're doing a ton, and how do we get it out there? So it's just to say that we are doing things, and we do it all the time, but always happy to hear from others on what more we can be doing, or how we can be doing things differently. So most of the stuff that you guys are seeing today came out of the Provincial Municipal Fiscal Service Delivery Review, PMFSDR. I was at AMO at that time, and it was 18 months of policy discussions, political discussions, and over 108 meetings, I think of about 60 of which I was involved in through the PMFSDR. And it was a great time because it was Patty Moore and a bunch of folks at the table, Brenda Patterson, driving the policy change at the provincial level, and there was a great appetite for it. And it was exciting. But again, having those broader policy discussions and how you operationalize them and within political contexts and political priorities often is a very different reality when you get to it. So the drive behind, but I have to say that most of it, all of the discussion was on the foundations of human services integration, which came out of, so I have 5, thanks Ailish, out of the OMSSA work at that time, which was great, but also the understanding that you guys know what's happening in your communities. You know that housing needs, transportation, costs of food, all those things manifest differently, so that one solution does not fit all. So it was a good change, and it makes a lot of sense. So as I said, the implementation is a little different, however, because when you couple that with multiple changes all at once, and it adds a good, healthy degree of complexity and, let's say, stress as well. And then you add that extra excitement of something in the form known as SAMs, and we are in a new game entirely. Yesterday, Samantha Nutt spoke about the stress of working in constant change and uncertainty, and I think we probably know that in terms of our personal lives when things aren't always going right, but certainly in your shops, because there's a lot of things coming at you at once, and for some of you, you are the one person who is the recipient for all those things, and that is difficult. But I just wanted to say that coming together on a cause or a concern, as we do through OMSSA and you do through your different networks, in fact can be, dare I say, revolutionary. Perhaps that is a little stretch, but I argue that when we are in the middle of change, it is often very difficult to get a good handle on all the things that are happening, what needs to happen, and what it actually means in the moment. But then there's the future, when you have the opportunity to actually pause, to settle, and look back of all the good work you guys have done and the impact it has on the ground. So where am I going with all of this? Well, many places, probably because I was just advised that I had to do this a couple days ago and I wasn't all that prepared, but I'll keep trying. Yeah, keep going. But I should probably land on some key messages. One is, never doubt what you do is an important and in fact honorable. And I think perhaps for many of you, you are negotiating a lot of different stresses and you don't necessarily feel or hear the praise that you deserve because it is important. Remember SAMs as an example. Perhaps out of LSR, the implementation of SAMs has in no uncertain terms demonstrated not only your strengths in rising to a challenge, be it your or let's say the province's challenge, but the importance of local responsiveness and commitment. The headlines are screaming for many months, and at one point, many of you were actually not individually, but as collective workers, thrown under the bus. Whereas in fact, at that time, you were keeping OW and your clients afloat. And I say, sadly, that those are the headlines that should have been out there. So I think it's just really important that you guys hear that. And my final point is OMSSA as your voice, and getting back to today. So let me focus on the last point, OMSSA today as your voice and association. Some of the things that we can do, and you've heard from Alf, is that we can present that bird's eye view, the $30,000 view, $30,000 feet view, bird's eye view of all the things that are happening and how they fit together, how they impact, and how we can go back to the province on your behalf and say, listen, there's a lot of things that aren't coming together. This is a better way to do it. So we can work as partners for the province to improve what they're doing, but also make your lives easier. So we can work together to forward issues and concerns collectively, increasing impact and understanding. And from the last point on driving broader change through collective action and impact, I'm happy to say, and I think probably many of you, and it may be different across different councils, we're no longer debating whether things need to be changed or addressed, whether we are now, rather we are now engaged in discussions on how to do things. How do we come together to do these things and address them? It is important, and I don't say this in terms of just saying, hey, self-aggrandization or anything, but there's no other organization like OMSSA in the province speaking on your behalf. There are advocacy organizations, there are different policy organizations, but there are no other organizations or associations who are advocating and supporting CMSMs in the work you do in the very specific way. We recognize you are often in a very tough position. You are representatives of local government and locally elected officials. And at the same time, you represent people in your communities that are often subject to debate of political ideology. Not perhaps as common as during what you were explaining, Alf, but it still exists, and we can attest to that given a recent cab ride. But ultimately, what you and what OMSSA are doing is trying to make lives better and strengthen our communities. And it is today for the tomorrow and the future that we will be hearing from, that we and OMSSA need to continue to strengthen our voices and efforts. I want to go back to SAMS for a moment, and just to help it wrap up. It was an extremely difficult time for OMSSA over the last few months when SAMS came out, and that may be surprising because we're not on the floors like you guys were and in that daily chaos, but we had a huge responsibility to come together and give good advice back to the province, both politically and otherwise. And there was a lot of work done working with your commissioners, CAOs, and staff on a daily basis, and then with the provincial reps to try and get stuff right and continue to do it. And I think SAMS demonstrates very clearly how much the province needs your expertise and wisdom today, and they always will. At the same time, it is critical, and this is where OMSSA has the other side of the role, is that we come in and we advocate on your behalf. Not just giving the advice on how to improve, but to say, this is what's happening to CMSMs and DSABS on the ground, and this is what they need to get out of it. Because when things happen quickly, some of the important things that are of interest to you can get lost in those discussions. So from my perspective, what is really important as staff at the association is that we appreciate your workload, your stresses, all the things that are happening. When something like SAMS comes down, that it's, your head's down, your nose is to the grindstone, you're getting stuff done. But it is never more critical at that time for us to hear from you and to work from you. So while it may be an extra effort to raise your head, to reach out, to work with us collaboratively, plenary, it is during these times that we really do need to hear from you and work with you, because putting in that extra effort, putting in that extra work is something that will save us huge down the road. And that's where we come together as a collective. We learn from you, we work for you, the province is better, communities are better. The last few, okay. So, sorry guys. So over the last 2.5 days, I have to say this has been a great conference, and thank you, Val, and your team, and April, and everybody that was here. It was just a wonderful experience, and you could really feel your effort in everything that was going on here. So I just wanted to say that, and I think it came back from the comments and the sessions and all of our speakers. And I think it also demonstrates that together we are much stronger. We are in an important time of do more with less. So it is definitely during this time that we need to work together to provide good and workable solutions. And we need to hear from you guys and work with you to do that. We need to do that because we're thinking about the future, and we're always thinking about the people we serve. And I think fundamentally, and as a last point, is to make our world and lives a little kinder and a little gentler. And perhaps for us to come together, perhaps a little more often, to dance together.